Welcome to Church Without Walls. I'm John Kirkwood, and this is
I'm Poe.
Poe. Mom told me that if I'm done in 15 minutes today, look at the smoke from the incense.
The incense.
Should we talk about hell today?
Yes.
Eternal conscious torment. I'm gonna get rid of that in a second because I realize now, distracting. Mom promised me if I'm done in 15 minutes today, because I told her, I said I'm gonna just do a 15-minute show today. It's gonna be easy peasy. Mm-hmm. She said I'd get a prize because she doesn't believe me.
Can I
So set your clock.
I'll set my clock.
15 minutes. Great show today. We're going to talk about Jesus writing a nasty letter to a church. One of my favorite. Coming up right after this. All right, we're back. I'm not quite sure where to put this to get rid of the smoke without starting a fire. Let's try it over here. Anyway, I want to jump right into it because I don't have a lot of time today. This transpired from a conversation I had with my wife this morning, and we were talking about a conversation she was having with a friend, and there was a comment made about Christian love, and in a vein that it was hard to recognize sometimes in Christ followers, particularly in our time, in our place, and that is a shame. But it did remind me of a relatively terse letter that Jesus wrote. People know that Paul wrote letters to the churches. Well, there's a little book called Revelation of the Apocalypse of Jesus Christ, where Jesus writes 7 letters to 7 churches. And Luther didn't think it should be in the canon. Personally, I don't think there should be a canon. I think we manufacture our own canon, and that's a much more trustworthy way, but that's a lesson for another day. But it is, and there is some precious stuff in Revelation. It's been abused because modern Christians don't understand ancient Jewish apocalyptic literature, but not all of it is fodder for fundamentalists, fear-mongering with end time stuff. Number of the Beast, and there's been movies made and books sold upon the millions to scare Christians straight, and we're misusing the book. And there's some Christians who believe that Revelation happened in the past, and some that believe it's going to happen in the future. And I think, just like the early chapters of Genesis, we miss what it's teaching us if we pretend that's what's going on. So Jesus writes to a church in Ephesus, whom Paul wrote to as well, but it didn't save. Oh, here it is. It's saved here. So I'm going to read right from the 2nd chapter of Revelation, first 7 verses. Even though I recommended 2 other Bibles recently, the Net Bible and the Oxford Annotated Edition, those are my study Bibles. My reading Bible, I like the Message Bible. It's a heretic Bible. People hate the Message Bible. The evangel. What am I looking for? Fundamentalists, the evangelicals hate the Message Bible because it's strayed from the only God ordained King James or something like that. But I love the Message Bible. It reads in modern English. It does a great job, I believe. And you be the judge of it. Let's hear from the Message Bible, Revelation 2. Write this to Ephesus, to the angel of the church, messenger of the church, the one with 7 stars in his right fist grip, striding through the golden 7 lights circle, speaks. I see what you've done. So the essence here, folks, is Jesus is speaking to the churches. God himself is speaking to the churches. I see what you've done, your hard work, your refusal to quit. I know you can't stomach evil, that you weed out apostolic pretenders. I know your persistence, your courage in my cause, that you never wear out. But you walked away from your first love. Why? You know, I get the sense here, I'm going to come back to this, but I get the sense here this is a conversation that the father in Luke 15 could have had with his elder son in the field. You know, are you keeping time? Because I might go
I
over
do.
15 if I get into this, because Luke 15 is my favorite
You're
passage.
5:30.
5 minutes?
No, 4. No,
Oh my
4
God.
minutes 30.
All right, 11
40
minutes left.
seconds.
So the
40.
father is speaking to the eldest son in the field. He won't come in. He won't come in because he actually has resentment against not his brother. His brother is just a target of the resentment. The resentment he actually has is for his father, for Grace. He can't stomach Grace. And so this is a conversation the father could have had with his eldest son. Now, granted, this is where a lot of Christians make mistakes. A lot of Christians elevate the elder son in the field. They love the elder son in the field. They look at him and he looks to be working hard like Franklin Graham or like, I shouldn't drop names, but there are a lot of Christians who, you know, who are working their fingers to the bones and they got calluses from being out in the field and having their hands on the plow and being the first out in the field in the morning and the last to leave. And the neighbors in the neighboring farm would look over on that farm and they'd say, "Wow, I hope he asks my daughter to the prom. What a good Christian boy he is." And he was dead. He was a judgmental hypocrite. You know, he was a Pharisee standing on the wrong corner in Luke 15. He was as wayward as the prodigal on his worst day, falling off the barroom stool. So anyway, this is a conversation that the father could have had with the elder son in the field. He said, "I see what you've done. Your hard work. I see, you know, the calluses you've got, and you're first out of the barn and last to the supper table. Your refusal to quit. I know you can't stomach evil. Oh yeah, that's their primary." That's their primary arrow. That's the only arrow they have in the quiver. They're pretty good at pointing out other people's sin. I know you can't stomach evil, that you weed out oh my God, I'm talking so fast it's Mom's fault because I got to be done soon. Apostolic pretenders. You know, do you know people who are good at pointing out pretenders and are quick to use words like heresy and blasphemy and heretic and apostate and backslider? This is them. I know your persistence, your courage in my cause, that you never wear out. But, this is a big but. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. A big but. Who's got a big butt? J-Lo? This is a J-Lo butt right here. But you walked away. Oh, no, Kim Kardashian butt. But you walked away from your first love. Why? What's going on with you anyway? Do you have any idea how far you've fallen? A Lucifer fall. Turn back. Recover your dear early love. There's no time to waste, for I'm well on my way to removing your light from the golden circle. I'm going to snuff you out. That's what it says here. I'm going to rub you out if you're into mob movies. You do have this to your credit. You hate the Nicolaitan business. I hate it too. Are your ears open? This is something a father says to a belligerent child. Listen to the wind words, the spirit blowing through the churches. I'm about to call each conqueror to dinner. I'm spreading a banquet of tree of life fruit, a supper plucked from God's orchard. Isn't that beautiful? That's the Message Bible. But you've forsaken your first love. You've forsaken your first love. What's the key here? My mother said the only way to open closed doors is love. Mary Kirkwood. She got that from her passion about the Bible, about her ability to weed out, you know, the non-essential and to focus on the essential. And the essential is always love. Love for God, love for others, you know. Paul writes to the Ephesian church, and if you are a student of Paul's letters, he's got kind of what would you call it, Poe? A pattern when he writes in his epistles where he talks to a church, and the first half of the epistle is positional truth. He talks about where you were before Christ, where you are now in Christ, and then he always gets to practical truth. So it's kind of like, the first half of the epistle is what Christ has done for us, and the second half of the epistle is what we can do for Christ. And always, if you look at what we can do for Christ, it starts with humility and love. Humility and love. So, for example, his letter to the Ephesians, the first 3 chapters are all positional truth. And then he gets to the 4th chapter and he tells us how to walk, right? And if we're going to walk like Christ, if we're going to speak like Christ, if we're going to act like Christ. And these passages, 4, 5, and 6 in Ephesians, are full of our readiness to be aware of our relationships and to be accountable for those relationships and to lead with love. So he'll talk about the relationship between a spouse and her husband or his wife. It'll talk about a parent's relationship to children. It will talk about our relationship to neighbors, even to employee and employers, our relationship in Romans. He talks about our relationship to the civil government. It was Nero at that time, you Christian nationalists who are kicking against the goads. But also even our relationship to enemies, whether it's Samaritans or Romans or, the jerk next door who plays rock music late in the night, or even, heaven forbid, country music. Lord, give me strength. So where are we? So lead with love. You've forgotten your first love. Christ says those who come into the kingdom must come with
11 minutes.
Childlike faith. How many times does Christ point us to a child as an object that we are to admire in certain ways? Now, in Ephesians itself, in Paul's letter to the Ephesians, he says, don't be like children in this way, but be like children in this way. Don't be like children in that they sometimes aren't certain. They stumble around uncertain. But be like children. Be simple when it comes to, for example, evil. Or be like children as they mimic their parents, right? As the little girl steps into her mother's high heels, or a little boy steps into his father's combat boots and tries to act like dad. Mimic your father. You're above, right? Paul says, follow Christ as I have followed Christ, or follow me as I have followed Christ. Followed Christ. I'm speaking faster than my brain could keep up. My mouth can't keep up, actually. So here it is, a childlike love. This is where we begin. How have we forsaken our first love when the church has become all about calling out evil? We don't see our own evil, right? The world points out the evil of the church, and we think our apologetic is to defend the church when it's indefensible in many chapters and many eras of church history, and including even now in certain geographical places and in the dark hearts of some who have taken the Lord's name in vain. But how do we remember our first love? When you first come into the faith, you do so mostly, as Madeline L'Engle says, because we see a light that's so beautiful, we want to follow it. That light is Christ. It's not Christianity. It's not church history. It's not even Bible doctrine. Little kids ran to Jesus. They didn't know Bible doctrine. They just sensed love and acceptance and interest. They sensed a warmth there. To forget your first love as a Christian is to forget Christ. And for many years, I told my wife this, coming out of dispensationalism has such a focus on Pauline truth that I remember my father was almost rooted out of his pulpit because he strayed from teaching the Pauline epistles, and he dabbled into the Gospel of John or, Hebrews, which half the church didn't think Paul wrote. So, and even if he wrote it to the Hebrews. Why are we studying this? We're grace era, church age dispensationalists. And so There was a guffaw, there was almost a pitchfork and fire torch riot when my father taught the Gospel of John and Hebrews, and he said he wanted to teach those two before he left the pulpit because there was such a centrality about Christ there. I know people, from that background, they resent if you go into the Old Testament to point out a truth, or even if you dabble in the Gospels. But you poor soul, don't you know? There's greater truth than that. It really is. Jesus in that world becomes a pawn and not a king on the chessboard. He's expendable. Paul's not. There is no such thing as being Pauline and not being Paulist. My father used to say that, but 99.9% of the people I met in that movement were Paulist, including people in my own church. When I remember once walking into the communal men's bathroom and a fellow said to me, "Thank God for this grace movement," he says. And I've never liked that terminology. So I said, "Well, why do you think what do you mean by that? I love the word grace, but what do you mean by the grace movement?" And he said something unintelligible. And I said, "Well, why do we center on grace and not on love?" And he left the church over that because I wasn't grace. How much time do I have?
It's at 15:30 seconds.
I went over.
Yeah. By 30 seconds. Now 45. I didn't check.
I lost my prize.
If
All right.
we end now,
How do we remember our first love? My father used to say, and I love this quote, occupation
16.
with Christ. My mother would say, occupation with Christ. In whatever situation you're in, view the world, view the Bible through the eyes of Christ, and then you won't be trapped, and you won't become like these loveless Ephesians who were quick to talk about evil, and they didn't realize that the Lord was about to snuff them out. They were useless in his cause. They were quick to point out the heretics. Oh, no, those aren't real apostles. Oh, these people over here in this corner are not true followers of Christ because they read from the Message Bible. Oh, those people don't rightly divide. You can't listen to them. Oh, Catholics aren't real Christians. There's a whole list of this foul, dirty diaper that has become Christianity in many segments of Christianity today, all because we've forsaken our first love, and it's very simple: Christ. That's it. I guess I'm over. I'm done.
1 minute.
So remember, how do you get beyond this? Well, if you're in a denomination, if you're in a church that has forsaken your first love, you've got to move beyond that. What's holding you there? Tradition? The fact that your grandfather helped build the church, or what would people think? Even in that church, you can recover your first love in spite of what those around you are doing. And ask yourself this. The first thing is to ask yourself this. Is your community of faith, does it sound like the Ephesian church that Jesus wrote to? Are they quick to point out evil in the culture? Are they fighting a culture war? Are they quick to point out fellow believers who aren't really Christians? They're fake Christians or wayward Christians. Is this their primary, the two strings on their guitar, pointing out other people's evil and other people's failure to live the Christian life? How much do they talk about Jesus? Or are they ridiculed? Do they ridicule other Christians who talk about the love of Jesus and Jesus himself, and they're not, chapter and versing other people to death, using the Bible as a billy club or a ventriloquist dummy? So personally, I pray about this all the time. Have I forsaken my first love? And remember, when we talk about this, our primary accountability to Christ is how we treat other people, how we act in the community of marriage, the community of family, the community of even our local assembly, our local polis. How do we treat our enemies? How do we treat our neighbors? Is it love that's going to open these closed doors? Or do we chapter and verse them and condemn them and judge them and make them distant, make them over there? There were a lot of things that the Ephesian church was doing. There was a lot of things that the elder son in the field was doing. He was weeding, he was planting, he was sowing. It wasn't doing any damn good for the Father. Actually, it was insulting. This is what's happening in Ephesians. Has our candle been snuffed out? Oh, that's it, Poe. When a candle gets snuffed out, well, that's incense, but pretend it's a candle snuffed out. That's all you see is the smoke. You see the symbol, and there's no substance. All right, love you, folks. We'll see you next week.
You want to see my progress?
You win, Mom. Oh, yeah. Poe's progress.
Didn't get much done. I just did his face.
That's pretty good. All right, Officer Dangle is coming to life. We'll see more. Maybe you could clothe him. At least put his pants on. At least put his hot booty shorts on. All right, we'll see you, folks. Thank you.